Welcome to Fundamental Journalism Skills Video Stories Part 1. In this lesson, we're going to talk about telling power visual stories using the elements of videography and video storytelling. I like to call it wise broadcast journalism: writing, interviewing, shooting, and editing. We're going to look at all of those in this lesson, not necessarily in that order. We're going to take a look at some more in part 2 of this series. But let's first have a glimpse at a story by District 20 Television out in Colorado Springs. This is a news story with the reporter in the studio introducing the story. We see an OSG over-the-shoulder graphic, actually a TV screen, nice addition to the studio there. And then we open up with B-roll here, we call it. You're going to learn about all of these different video elements in just a moment. B-roll shots of these the floods in Colorado Springs 2 springs ago. And then we have our on-camera interview. It's called a SOT or an A-roll with the meteorologist here. Nice composition there. You'll see why when we look at A-roll composition. And we cut away to some more B-roll, some tight shots of the Doppler radar and the weather, and some more B-roll sequences here. Actually has some jump cuts in there, which we don't like, but this is a good sequence here. And underneath this, you're hearing the meteorologist interview and the VO, what's called a voiceover from the reporter. We're just not listening to it now, we're watching it. And then we're going to go to, in just a moment, another on-camera interview after this B-roll sequence here. There it is. Notice how it's on the other side of the frame, opposite the meteorologist's interview. That's purposeful. When you interview 2 people on camera, you want to put them on opposite sides for balance. I wanted to give you a glimpse of these package elements in a video story before we get going. And you can really use a lot of the techniques that we're going to learn here for all kinds of coverage: live sports broadcasting, concerts, debates, even movie making. They really carry over. Let's take a look at the terminology you're going to be responsible for, and the quiz after this video lesson is on the basic broadcast terminology. B-roll are your video shots that are not the on-camera interview. So your wide, medium, and tight sequencing shots like we saw of the floods and the river and the storefronts and whatnot. A-roll, also known as SOT in the industry, sound on tape, are your interview subjects. Those are your on-camera interviews. Voiceover is a script written by the reporter, prepackaged and then put into the piece underneath the B-roll so that we can connect the story. Lower third graphics are the identifiers. Every time we see someone new on camera, we want to know their name and their title. Nat sound is the natural sound you gather when you're out shooting, the crack of a bat or the sound of the wind. And the reporter stand-up. It's on camera. It's usually scripted. It is the reporter on camera helping to bridge the story. And this is how you put it into a package. We're going to take a closer look at this in the editing room, but look at the A-roll. That's the on-camera interview on the bottom there, the bottom arrow. It is the lengthier piece. That is our SOT, or our interview with our subject. And then we're putting B-roll sequences above it in the editing room so that we can create a sequence. We're telling the editing program that we want the viewer to see the sequences of B-roll above or instead of the A-roll. So we're still hearing the A-roll below it. We'll talk more about that later. Let's turn our attention to interviewing and interview composition. So SOTs, sound on tape, are our interview subjects. And I want to show you a piece briefly here. There's no sound, but we don't need it. We just want to take a look at the composition of this interview with Mr. Fagnant, a piece by Jason Lewis on a profile of Mr. Fagnant. So we're getting in his classroom. You're getting a look here at B-roll sequences as well, wide, medium, and tight shots that make up the sequence to take us there. But I want you to focus on the composition of the SOT, or the interview with Mr. Fagnant. It's very nicely placed. The background in his office could be a little better, but hey, that's where he works, that's where he sits, and we are in his environment. So that's always good to be there in the subject's environment to shoot that interview. We see some more nice sequencing here with some B-roll. So I wanted you to get an idea of how the A-roll and the B-roll work together, and we'll take a closer look at that with some pieces with sound. Let's take a look at the composition of the SOTs, or the A-roll, the actual interviews. Rule of thirds, you remember that from photography. Our interview subject we want to place on the rule of thirds and have their eyes on third. This way they're talking into the talking space there and towards the interviewer. You see on the bottom, the two examples, we have the Miss Dubler looking on the bottom left into the wrong end of the talking space. It creates an awkward moment there, kind of an awkward framing. And then the Mr. Barnett piece that you just saw and the Father Harrison piece that flashed over it, both of those, they're not on the thirds. They're way too small. We don't need all the knees. Remember the meteorologist from the piece we watched from District 20. Great eyes on third. And how this is done, you can see it in this frame on your top left with the reporter and the videographer working together to interview and making sure that the interview subject's eyes are looking at the reporter and not into the camera and looking into the right end of the talking space. That eyes on third and looking into the talking space, so important. Great idea here with Father Harrison to frame him up in the background of the world map there, because it's a piece about his travels, but poor execution on the composition. Let's talk about sound. Lavalier mic is what Mr. Sauer's wearing here. You can barely see it. That's ideal for an on-camera interview, but sometimes you don't need it if it's a quiet environment. The key is that you've got to keep those headphones on if you're the photographer so that you know that your interviewer is getting great sound. We'll talk more about sound. It's one of the trickiest things to do, and we'll practice it in the studio. Lighting and background. Let's take a look at this composition of this interview with Mr. Howard. Great idea to put him in his office. It's a piece about his love for superheroes. He's got the superhero shirt on, the action figures behind him. Problem is the light, which is the sun here coming through the window. Yes, you can even get natural light indoors. Great idea, but it's washing him out. So you have to work with the photographer to control that environment if you're the reporter, and making sure that you're getting good background and good lighting. You always want that light behind you. Let's move on to shooting B-roll. There are three kinds of shots that you get when you're out shooting B-roll for action and reaction for sequencing. Wide, medium, and tight. These three shots from the Okie Dokie Brothers concert, Grammy Award-winning artists when they visited RJ and played a concert for kids. You see the wide shot, the medium shot, and the tight shot. Let's look at how this is put into a sequence. You'll want to take a variety of shots because you're going to have to sequence them in your B-roll sequences with 3 or 4 shots back to back to back, and you want to get those tight shots. Take a look here. There's our medium shot, our wide shot at the beginning, then our medium shot, and then our tight shot here, creating a sequence of 3 shots that really takes us into the classroom here for this teacher profile. Let's take a look at another shooting rule here, shooting rule number 3, using the elements of composition. You remember them from photography. Well, we use them in videography as well. Framing, we remember that from the Fagnet piece. High angle, low angle, and rule of thirds you can use even when you're shooting B-roll. Mr. Bruno in action teaching here, and great rule of thirds to show us the classroom and the talking space that he's talking out into. Editing your video, it takes practice. We're going to do a lot of it in the studio, and you'll have a chance to really get some good experience with Final Cut Pro, the editing software we use. But make sure when you're out in the field that you get a lot of footage, get those tight shots, get that B-roll so that you have the opportunity to do this. In the studio, we see once again the A-roll or the SOT, the on-camera interview there on the bottom, which is the longer piece, and then above it are built the sequences of B-roll shots so our viewer can go away from the interview and see what's going on. Couple more shooting rules. Jump cuts. That's when we cut from a medium shot to a medium shot or a wide to a wide. It creates a jarring sensation for the viewer. Hold those shots for 6 to 10 seconds. Make sure you're getting nat sound. Those headphones are on like Charlie Smith has in this photo here. So for a review here, we've talked about B-roll, wide, medium, and tight shots. We've talked about SOTs or on-camera interviews, voiceovers written for the piece. We'll hear some of those. Reporter stand-ups, that's the reporter on camera, lower third graphics, and nat sound. Knowing these basic broadcast terms and techniques will really allow you to tell professional video stories, and being out in the field shooting and And doing on-camera interviews and putting them into packages is a lot of fun, and it can be a very powerful way to tell stories. We're going to take a look now at a piece on the Raider Red Sea and take a look for all of these elements in that piece. The nat sound used, the reporter stand-up, the voiceover script, the on-camera interviews or the SOTs, the sequences of B-roll that are put into the piece to tell this story about the student section by RJTV reporters Ryan Maxfield and Carter Alcock.
Right now, I'm in the middle of the Regis Jesuit student section, the Raider Red Sea. It can get pretty crazy in here. I can't imagine having to play a noise like this.
You're just excited from playing the game, first of all, but then when you just come out and you just see everybody just cheering and just going crazy, it's amazing. We play a lot of schools who don't really have a student section, and it's just, you could tell there's a huge difference when we're playing here with our student section, and when we go somewhere else and play like against some other team without a student section. It just makes everything so much more fun.
The leaders of the Red Sea, the Rowdies, help facilitate the excitement that the student section is known for.
When everyone thinks of the Rowdies, it's somebody that's wacky, that just wants to be there to, pump up the crowd and be there for their team. It's a bigger responsibility. Obviously, you're a leader around the school, and you're definitely on the spotlight a lot. But, that's what thrills you as a Rowdy, is to be on that spotlight and to, pump up the team as well as the student section. I went to a lot of hockey games this year. We didn't really officially Rowdy any hockey games, but I took the megaphone a couple times to the hockey games, and just yelling down there influences them in a way, just knowing that somebody's there cheering them on.
This is Carter Alcock and Ryan Maxfield for RJ Media.
Let's take a look at this piece again together for the elements of broadcast technique. We start here with a reporter stand-up creative idea by Ryan and Carter to be right in the student section. We start the piece with some great nat sound, natural sound from the gym. We can hear the Rowdies doing their thing and the student section being loud. And then we get our first on-camera interview after our bit of voiceover there. We hear him before we see him, and there's Jeff Kelly there. They decided to keep the green of the studio, but here's what I really like about this. We see Jeff walking out. The B-roll matches the A-roll. So he's talking about walking out on the court, and we see him walking out on the court. Great B-roll shot here with framing technique. More shot of Jeff. We like to see the people in B-roll that we are hearing in the A-roll. That is so key. You can't just have random shots that don't make any sense. We get some more nat sound amidst the piece here and some voiceover by Carter, short, active, and written to bridge the gaps. And then our second on-camera interview, you can tell, is on that other side, and we see Peter in this B-roll here. So again, there's Peter in action. We are seeing him while we are hearing his interview. Those sequences put right over the A-roll. Love this tight shot here.
That's what thrills you as a
Good
Rowdy,
sequencing of the B-roll, and then we're back to the interview.
Pump up the team as well as the student section.
Good interviews done with both of these subjects, and I love how they use the nat sound to stand alone at the beginning of this piece.
We didn't really officially Rowdy any hockey games.
And it matches the interview. The voiceover connects the story ideas and bridges those storytelling areas. Love this shot. Low angle, filling the frame, showing the emotions on the faces. The B-roll variety that they got was very good. And ending it again with great nat sound. We start wide and then we go tight here. Really puts us in the crowd. A well done piece that incorporates all of the elements of broadcast technique. Thank you for joining me for Fundamental Journalism Skills Video Stories Part 1. Take the quiz on the website on these basic techniques, and I'll see you for Video Stories Part 2, where we'll break down and take a look at several other video stories from RJTV, as well as a professional video story. See you next time.